Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are just going to give it a couple of seconds to allow everyone to join and get settled, and then we'll get started. But in the meantime, I'd like to just welcome you to our session, Structured Literacy for Neurodiverse Learners, Effective Solutions for Students with Dyslexia, Autism, and ADHD. We are super lucky to be joined by Dr. Liz DeVargas-Almeida, Literacy Coordinator for the Pajaro Valley Unified School District, and Dr. Paul Black, Chairman of the Board at RISE Institute for Literacy. Thank you again for joining us. And with that, I will turn things over to our speakers.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. I just want to start with a little definition here. We're talking about students who have diverse processing, right? Maybe their brain is formed a little bit differently in their processing. Maybe we are also having those natural variations in ourselves because we're all different. Then we're going to add on those cultural and ID backgrounds. Like we're very different people, so we process differently. So in our classroom, we might have a variety of students. But the most common neurodiverse groups we have in our classrooms are students with dyslexia, ADHD, and autism. When we add on to that some overlapping qualities of anxiety and depression, we have students in our classroom that have needs that we need to attend to ensure that everybody is learning. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that today. So we're going to move on to that next slide here. If your classroom is a classroom with students, you may, of course, all our classrooms have students. You may have students with varying needs. You may have students that have dyslexia. They may be they may have autism or ADHD. They may just be anxious students. They may come with no IEP and no 504 plan, but you may notice that they have differing needs. You may have multilingual learners. You may have multilingual learners who are also have dyslexia or a variety of other concerns and issues that we have to take care of in our classroom. Regardless, what we're going to talk about today will help ensure that all of our students are learning. We want to break down those barriers and ensure that our students can actually focus on the learning, take that in, and apply it so they are nice and strong and ready to face any challenge or any strength that the world has to offer. So we're really going to talk about ensuring that we're giving the best explicit instruction to our students possible. Oh, Paul, you're muted there.
Oh, there we go. Thank you, Dr. Liz. We were just talking before the webinar began about how frustrating it can be and overwhelming. I think maybe that's the better word. It's so overwhelming for a teacher to have such a diverse class and have to be able to and be expected to be able to meet all of their needs, especially when that diversity, that neurodiversity is so broad. And so I'm excited to be able to present this with you because you are such a wonderful resource. Classroom. I've been in the classroom. This is something that we've lived with every day of our educational career. How do we meet the needs of all of our students without going crazy, right? Without them getting frustrated. And there's some things that we can do. And I think that explicit instruction is really, to kind of skip ahead, is a thread that is going to pull this all together. So let's talk about the challenges of literacy. I'm the chairman of the board of RISE Institute for Literacy. I'm a school psychologist by training, and I'm also part of my early childhood education evaluation team. Literacy is at the forefront of my mind quite often because of my own family struggles. We went through dyslexia doesn't run in my family, it gallops in my family. And I've seen generations impacted by it because their needs weren't be able to be met in the classroom. And a lot of that is because it just wasn't understood. Dyslexia isn't when you're not trying hard enough. A lack of inability or an inability to read isn't because you missed school like maybe a handful of times. It's not because your parents don't work with you enough. Literacy, and being able to read is really a complicated neurological process that involves multiple parts of the brain working together simultaneously without effort. And in a moment of time, being able to decode symbols into sounds and blend those sounds together to form language, right? It is not a natural process. It's more natural for some students, but for about 20% of our students, they require a very prescriptive and set of instruction to be able to form the neural networks that make reading possible for the students. And we can't take that for granted. So when we have instruction that is implied and not explicit, or we have instruction that requires students to stretch their cognitive bandwidth instead of reducing their cognitive bandwidth to focus on this, then it becomes harder, not easier for them to learn. Next slide. And I'll tell you a little bit about what that might look like in the classroom. So for my students, I have very bright students that don't know how to read or struggle with reading. It's not an issue of intelligence. It begins to feel like that. It begins to be a social emotional issue because students are faced with failure over and over and over again. Being able to automatically decode symbols into sounds and blend those together into meaning, again, takes a specific type of instruction for a lot of our students. It has to be explicit. It has to be systematic. And that type of instruction benefits all students, not just the 20%. And for too long, our educational system has looked at our reading scores and said, well, 20, 30% are struggling to read, but 70, 80% aren't. So we're going to focus on that 70, 80%. And that has real life consequences. The outcomes for those students are decidedly more poor. It's not a surprise that, nearly 2 out of 3 prisoners in our federal justice system and federal penitentiaries are dyslexic, right? The school to prison pipeline is welded with illiteracy. And again, we can't take for granted that, 80% are doing okay, maybe 20% struggle. We really need to help that 20% because the prescription for that 20% works for everybody. Which is a wonderful thing too that we need to really embrace. And that involves explicit systematic instruction because then students don't have to guess, because then it frees up that cognitive bandwidth to focus on learning and reading and making it automatic so they can understand. Okay, go ahead to the next slide, Alicia. And secondly, there's about a 30% overlap. Students with ADHD, students who have ADHD also have reading challenges to the point where it could be considered dyslexic. And so it's very common. Again, we have our students that are neurodiverse, and you think about our students with ADHD, they not only do they get redirection and correction more than their peers, 3, 4, 5 times more. So school feels less safe, less rewarding. So they have that social emotional part that is a part of it. They also miss a lot of instruction. Reading, attending to instruction requires that you are able to use executive functioning like paying attention for an extended amount of time. It also involves shifting your attention from what's not important to what is important. It involves working memory, remembering what you're being taught so you can apply it later. And how many times have we as teachers worked with a student who is struggling and they finally seem to get it? And we come back in the afternoon or the day later and it's gone. And you have to start all over again. How do we support those students? And again, explicit instruction. If I have instruction that is implied, if I have instruction that is not chunked, where the teacher just kind of lectures for 45 minutes, but it's not chunked into small steps, where I don't have visual reinforcement, then I am going to struggle to learn how to read. One of my favorite things to do for my students with ADHD is to reduce the burden on their executive functioning skills, which means having visuals um, that they can refer to that is almost like a visual note, right? To having shared notes, to having, if I'm doing a presentation, to having them have a copy of what I'm doing, what I'm teaching, so they can refer back to it. If I'm requiring my ADHD students to understand implied instruction and to remember what I'm teaching them when they already have a deficit of executive functioning, then that's going to be very challenging for that student. So I need to do specific things to be able to keep them in the lane of success so they can feel success. Next slide, please. And finally, my students that are on the spectrum. And this has really exploded. I remember when I first started graduate school back in the early 2000s, it was like 1 in every 230 students are, considered to be autistic or Asperger's at the time. And now it's like 1 in 30. And there's a spectrum. And I have students that are on the spectrum that aren't formally diagnosed that are in my classroom. And they have language-based challenges too. They take things very literally, often. And unlike the student who has ADHD, who is seeking out stimulation and moving from one thing to the next and can't really focus for an extended period of time, my students with autism don't know when to shift their attention or transition their attention from this piece of instruction to the next piece of instruction. And I can't assume that it's just going to happen. Again, explicit instruction for my students on the autism spectrum is absolutely critical for them because it provides predictability. They're not guessing and languishing and then trying to transition to something else. Another thing for my students on the autism spectrum, I need to let them know where the off ramp is and the on ramps are. Usually, I compare it to like driving down the freeway. A neurotypical individual can change lanes, can speed up, can slow down, can get off the off ramp, can get back on the off ramp. We have that cognitive flexibility. That rigidity, that doesn't exist for my students on the autism spectrum, or to a large degree, doesn't exist. What they are more like is a train, like a locomotive on train tracks. They're slowing down is very difficult. Changing tracks is very difficult. Everything that involves cognitive flexibility doesn't necessarily come natural or easy to them. And so I have to prep them. I have to say, this is what we're going to do. And then in about 5 minutes, we're going to make a change, but I'm going to come back and tell you. And then I will go ahead with my instruction. I'll come back in 5 minutes and say, okay, in a couple of minutes or after we're done with this, we're going to transition to this. And I always end up with something positive too. Thank you for working so hard. Thank you for paying attention. I'm glad you're here. Let's get prepared to do this in just a few minutes. But again, that explicit instruction is a part of that. Now, next slide, please, Alicia. Now, what does dyslexia, ADHD, autism all have in common at school? Significantly increased incidence of anxiety and depression. Now, what is fascinating to me about this, and a tragedy as well, is there is not a biological link between ADHD, autism, dyslexia, and depression. There's nothing that says you have ADHD, so you're going to have depression. You have anxiety. I mean, you have dyslexia, you're going to have depression. You have autism, you're going to have depression, right? It is how we treat it in the classroom. And I know that's a big load to carry. Um, but there are things that we inadvertently do that increase the incidence of feeling anxious and depressed in classrooms with our neurodiverse students. For example, if you have dyslexia, there is a 40% chance that you exhibit or manifest the symptoms of anxiety, not just a little bit of anxiety, but clinical anxiety to the point where you can be clinically diagnosed with an anxiety disorder. And you start to think about it. My brain is wired in a certain way. and I'm in a classroom and the information is coming to me at a way that I don't really understand, yet I have expectations to understand it and to produce something with it, and I can't, and I struggle, and I feel the failure over and over and over and over again. There are, in terms of trauma, it's called a complex trauma. We have acute trauma, which is like a single event or maybe a once repeated event. And then we have complex trauma, which are these little traumas that happen over and over and over and over and over again. And for our students that are neurodiverse, this is a part of their life. And so, what we need to do as educators is work with their biology, work with their neurobiology, work with the way their brain is wired, not against it, not asking them to change who they are, but work with it and make it easier for them so that they can start to feel success. Because when they feel success, the levels of anxiety and depression decrease, and it impacts them and it influences them in a positive way across the board, at home, with their friends, at school, and so on. And Liz, this is really your area of expertise, how to help these students in the classroom. It's what you spent your life doing.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's look at that next slide there. When we are talking with our students, or talking about our students that have a lot going on that impedes their ability to learn what's presented in front of them, they need scaffolds and support. And predictable routines is the first thing we can do. It is not a curriculum. It is not a strategy, really. It's just how we, so to speak, live our lives in that classroom, right? It's that predictable routine. I think of one specific student who is not neurodiverse that I know of, but was extremely anxious. And she needed these routines there to know how to function in the classroom, or else she was just too much. It was just too overwhelming for her. And then she couldn't learn. There was nothing about her learning. She could access the information if we had these predictable routines down for her. Is actually extremely intelligent. Again, with our neurodiverse students, it's not a learning issue. It's an access issue. So we have to break down those barriers. So by giving them predictable routines, those visual schedules, they might have the visual schedules on the board or the visual schedules on their desk. They might have manipulatives and other scaffolds. Now, when we provide these scaffolds and these visuals, we must teach our students how to use them. Otherwise, it's another task that they are going to worry about and they're going to focus on. And then the cognitive load goes to learning how to use that support, which it shouldn't be. It should be on accessing the information in front of us. So we want to build in that time so that they can practice that support, practice using those tools like manipulatives or whatever it is in our routines so that our students can focus on the good stuff. Focus on that learning. If we have a student who has ADHD and the classroom environment is not made for that student, along with all of the other things that impede the classroom daily, classrooms are very dynamic. You're looking at students who are accessing information minutes of the day. So that makes learning to read extremely challenging minutes of the day. It's also going to affect numeracy and math application. They need more than just a few minutes every day. So by creating predictable routines and teaching their students to use these predictable routines allows them to focus on the good stuff, to focus on the curriculum, the standards, the learning, so that they are successful. And then that helps reduce that anxiety and builds their confidence, right? And we talk about that next slide. So aside from predictable routines, we want to have explicit instruction. Dr. Black has talked about this a lot. I said it right at the beginning as well. We moved a slide. We're going to move it forward. One more to that. There we go. Explicit instruction is very important. Now, explicit can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. In the elementary world, we usually say it's the I do, we do, you do. And the you do, I'm releasing you to do your work. But actually, there's some more complex issues in there. When we say explicit, we mean we want it to be clear. Everybody understands what I'm talking about. We are all going to learn this right now. And I'm going to give you those step-by-step instructions. I'm not going to overwhelm you by giving you all the instructions. I'm going to take it bit by bit so you can stay with me. I am going to have in my plan times where you're getting feedback from me, and that feedback's going to vary. I'm going to have you participating in a variety of ways, not just raising your hand, not just turn and talk to a neighbor, not just using manipulatives, whatever it is, there's going to be a variety in place. Again, with our students that are neurodiverse, you do have to practice these ahead of time so that they are confident and can do these with automaticity so that we're not shocking them or challenging them. Because again, those barriers will come up and they will focus on what does it mean? How do I do this? And not listening to that information. So we want the explicit information. We want it step by step. We want multiple opportunities to practice and multiple opportunities for varied feedback. And we want that all connected to the task. Everything needs to be connected from the purpose, right? All the way down to what I'm teaching and what you're speaking back in small group or individually to the task you're going to be able to do on your own and fluently. Everything must be connected. For some students, multiple opportunities means 3. For some students, multiple opportunities means 20. That is the way it is. Everybody needs to get their needs met. We might not do all 20 repetitions in front of the class tier 1. We might then take a small group, recognize that these friends need extra support, they need extra practice, so we're going to be there with them. But we are going to make sure everybody gets the practice that they need. And again, those visual supports, we're going to have that routine with them, but anytime we make a visual support, we want to make sure it's a living document. I've been in many classrooms, my own past classrooms, where me, created a poster in front of the children sometimes not, and it's on the wall, and I talk about it once, and there it lives. Nope, that doesn't work. Our students will see it as wallpaper, and it'll just blend in, and they will maybe not notice it. So if you want them to use your visual supports, you must teach them to use them and you must refer to them often. So I like those to be living documents. Refer to them, add sticky notes to them, write on them, have students walk up to them, touch them, get what they need from them so that they don't become wallpaper. So that is all explicit instruction, is all vital. Will this hurt your neurotypical students? Absolutely not. It's a prerequisite for all of our students to learn this. We say our students that are neurodiverse, our students that are language learners, and our students that are having issues learning, they're behind for whatever reason, all can benefit from explicit instruction. So our students that are on target and are regularly moving through with no other issues will not be hurt. They will also benefit from explicit instruction because they won't be guessing. They will know what we're asking for. So
Hey, Liz.
that's my first solution. Yes.
There was a question from Nathan or a comment. What about older students? What about adult students that are neurodiverse? Like, what advice do you have for those that might feel childish getting explicit instruction? Is there some tips for him?
I don't think I have the right answer, but what I'm going to say to that is yes, and also some cultures. Defining everything very specifically, like from my background, that's a lot. That I know what you're saying, and I can fill that in, and it aggravates me. So for students like that, I would put out there in front of them, I'm going to go over this step by step. Let me know when you have it. I would do more check-ins because then I would know when to release some of those scaffolds, when to go over something. It's not necessary. They don't need multiple opportunities. They have it. I would still put it out there and I would let them know what I'm doing, but then I would ask for more feedback from them. They're an adult.
Mhm.
They can tell me this is too much. I can go faster and then go faster.
And
That's
it's
my suggestion.
critical that they have developmentally appropriate materials too, because
Absolutely.
sometimes with adults, I mean, we like if I have a 10th grader or a 12th grader or a community college student or an adult, and I need to teach them phonics, and all I have is a first grade, second grade workbook. If I
No,
give that to them, I've
no.
lost them. I've shut it down. So it's almost like it's a non-negotiable that older students, adults, young adults get something that teaches them what they need to learn, where they're at, and is also developmentally appropriate.
Yeah, that's respectful. We are
Mhm.
humans and we deserve respect. And so we have to, and it's hard. And I'm not saying that finding these materials is easy. It is not. But we do, I think engaging in that communication with who we're serving is helpful, to let them know, I'm here with you. I'm trying to help you, to the best of my ability. Please let me know if this is working for you or if it is not. If they feel like I'm giving them something that's too childish, let me find something better. I do not mean to disrespect you. Let me keep on that challenge. I would definitely not give them the little race cars for Alconin boxes. That's not going to happen. I'm going to keep that at K1 too. We don't even want to do things like that with our third and fourth graders because even we're stepping on toes and we don't want to do that. That pulls those barriers go right up. And that's not what we want. Can we go to the next slide? So phonemic awareness, this is a big one, especially with our students who have dyslexia. We want to make sure that phonemic awareness, and I'm going to say a few things here. Phonemic awareness is key to learning to read fluently. It is key to reading multisyllabic words. In kinder and first grade, maybe even second grade, you learn a whole host. In preschool and kinder, you learn phonological awareness and then phonemic awareness. As an adult learner, you will not learn phonological awareness. You're going to focus on phonemic awareness and you're going to focus on a few types. Phonological awareness, you can figure out alliteration without specifically being taught alliteration at the age of 12 or at the age of 20. It fits TKK. But the other parts of phonemic awareness, the being able to determine the initial sound, the final sound, the medial sound, and I say it in that order on purpose, that medial sound is the hardest, being able to segment and blend, and being able to then delineate, substitute, manipulate word sounds is very important. It's imperative to be able to read fluently. So it has to happen at any age. Those pieces have to happen. So in our elementary classrooms, we focus on 6 to 12 minutes a day. Some curriculum have you going through all the pieces, the initial, the final, the manipulation, the segmentation, blending, etc. That's our tier 1 instruction. For our students that are not being able to keep up, they don't understand it, they're not applying it to their classroom work, then we are taking them to, I say, a tier 1.5. That's a small group during the regular day where we're focused on just one skill. What is one skill that is hindering them? And it's their first level of need. If they have 10 issues, if they're having problems with all of phonemic awareness, I'm not going to focus on the last one. I'm going to focus on that first need, that initial sound. And I'm going to work with those students that are having trouble with initial sound. And I'm going to use manipulatives and tactile tools like Alconin boxes, those chips, maybe sticky notes, Play-Doh, whatever, be very specific for their age. And I'm going to practice until they have mastered it, till it is fluent. They're doing it with automaticity and can apply it. And then I'm going to tackle their next level of need. They might not have just the next one. They might have a gap further down the line. They might not have any more gaps, what have you. We're always bending to our students. It's dynamic. So we want to make sure that we have that daily practice. Now, third, fourth, fifth, and beyond, it doesn't mean they have phonemic awareness. It doesn't mean they're going to pick it up. It does mean that we need to practice, and we're practicing like 1 or 2 minutes a day, and we're focusing on blending and segmenting. Do they have all their sounds? And then blending and segmenting. Very important that we practice that. And then phonemic awareness doesn't live in a bubble by itself. We go from phonemic awareness straight to phonics. If we teach it in isolation, just about everything in literacy, if we teach it in isolation, it will stay siloed. So we need to teach it and use it, teach it and apply it right away. So phonemic awareness is a huge one. There's no pictures related to phonemic awareness. It's all sound. There's no grapheme. We just want to be able to hear the sounds and manipulate the sounds. Sometimes it's an articulation issue where we are not producing the sound correctly. We're not hearing it correctly. So then our spelling is incorrect, or we approach words incorrectly because we have heard it incorrectly. Schwas are a big one. We're always trying to reduce schwas. I had a student in 4th grade and 5th grade who spelled with schwas because everything was she added that schwa sound to everything. We can't do this. We need to clean up those sounds. So phonemic awareness helps us with articulation and hearing the sounds correctly. If we go to the next slide, we will talk about this other anxiety-producing activity at every grade level. Doesn't matter if you're a child or an adult. Sometimes text is overwhelming. Sometimes text will raise our blood pressure because it is too large. It may seem overwhelming. It may seem that the vocabulary is too high, that you might not know what's going on. So the first thing we want to do is stop and take that box breath, helping our students realize that they can bring themselves back down right in front of you here. We're going to take a breath. We're going to inhale for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds, exhale for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds. We might do it a few times. We don't want anybody passing out. We're not going to do it quickly. We're not going to do it too many times, but we just want to recenter our students. This is something that would happen on a regular basis when we approached writing in the upper grades. K1, they kind of go with it most of the time, but middle school, there was a lot of forget it behaviors. And then in 4th and 5th, it's overwhelm and then behaviors. So we want to bring it back down with that breathing, and then we want to go line by line. Again, it's explicit, step-by-step instructions. I'm going to clearly let you know why we're doing this activity. Is it a reading activity or a writing response activity? We're going to go line by line. If it's overwhelming to see all the words on the page, maybe your students need something that cover the words. I know this is not new information. You've heard this. You've probably practiced this, but it does help. Even though the words are underneath that paper, sometimes just blocking them off so you can only see that one line of text. And then we're going to break it down. We're going to use student-friendly vocabulary. We're going to ask students to bring in their own background to break down what does it mean, what does it say. If we have multilingual learners, we're looking for any cognates. How can we connect to what this means? And then we're going to read it with that student-friendly language, whether it's synonyms or semantic gradients. Our students have a lot of background. So how can they access this? Then once we have that one line broken down so we all understand what it says, we go to the next line, and so on and so forth. And then we read it together. when it's completed, so we know what we have read, and then we can continue that conversation. We're always checking for understanding. We're always leaving room for some dynamic teaching. The students need more of this. Maybe they can't access this paragraph right now, even with these supports. Maybe I need to backfill in another way. So I want to make sure that you're giving yourself some room to do that. Same with writing. Maybe you're breaking it down sentence by sentence to read it so that you can go back and write to it. We're going to write line by line. We don't want that overwhelm. Once this becomes really automatic for students, then you're going to give them those opportunities to do it in a small group and to do it individually. But we're going to scaffold that down so it's not such a large process of here's the text, read this paragraph and respond, where they're going to freak out. And like I'm thinking of my own children, that's just a freak out. It's too much. They have not read one word on that page, but my child would say, this is too much. I don't have time for this. I can't. Okay. Take a breath. Let's go line by line. And that can really change the whole circumstance. Then their confidence gets boosted because their anxiety is down, and we've given them the scaffolds. Go to the next slide, please. Now, we may have multilingual learners in our classroom. Here in Pajaro Valley, about 70% of our students are multilingual learners. Now, you might find that you have multilingual learners who are also dyslexic, have autism, have ADHD, are anxious, have depression. It is also in our range of normal in our classrooms to have a variety of students. This whole webinar is about breaking down those barriers and ensuring that all of our students can access information. So again, when we're talking about explicit instruction, whether it be for literacy or math or science or social studies, what have you, we need that step-by-step will help everybody. Step-by-step instructions. Having those scaffolds or those supports there, like sentence frames. Many of our students will be able to answer partial questions. They'll be able to tie in their L1 with English, but they might not have a complete sentence. They might be able to give you those main pieces, that main idea, but they don't have the pronouns or conjunctions there. So a sentence frame really helps build their language to get that complete sentence out. Remember, these students are doing double duty, right? There's two languages going on. They're always going on. Sometimes there's more languages, and they're really working to bring their English out. So those scaffolds and supports will help them make those bridges, right? Again, they need that explicit instruction, that immediate feedback. We can't say feedback for later. It's not going to work. It's like when we graded papers and we put notes on them, and then we saw that paper in the recycle bin. Did you read the notes? Sure didn't. So that immediate feedback is imperative so that they can make adjustments and we can make adjustments and they can practice. If I say, you need to add a noun and walk away, that child may or may not know what a noun is, may or may not be using the appropriate noun for this sentence. No, they need practice. So I'm noticing you might need to add a noun here. Let's talk about some nouns. They're practicing with me, our partner. So they're getting that feedback and they're getting that practice, and it's purposeful. It ties into what we're doing. And as our scaffolds change with all of our students, once something becomes automatic and they're used to it and they're comfortable with it, we can grow those scaffolds. We don't need a simple sentence forever. We're growing it to more complex sentences as time goes on. We're not waiting, oh, next year it'll become more complex. No, when your student has taken ownership of that and are fluent, then build that complexity for them, because language is always growing and our students are always learning. So we need to keep growing. Mm-hmm. And we're always connecting to that academic vocabulary for all of our students. When we're breaking down our text, we're not going to keep it at that student vocabulary. That's how we're making that connection, student vocabulary and connecting it to that academic text. When we're giving scaffolds for multilingual learners, same thing, student friendly, and then building up that academic language, building it, use those cognates to make those connections and build and build and build. A reminder, if you have multilingual learners and you're using cognates, and those cognates are not terms that the students are familiar with or have used before, they are not useful. They are not useful to your activity at hand when you're trying to bridge the two languages. So make sure when you're using cognates, it is words that they're familiar with, vocabulary that they're familiar with. And I think I'm going to pass this on back to Dr. Black.
Hey, well, thank you, Dr. Liz. That was fascinating. I appreciate it. And it's interesting to watch these webinars and to see the comments, that come to us through these and the questions. And some of this, one of the threads that I've seen is, what do I do with my older learners who are neurodiverse? And now, the same final reminders. I think this is good for all learners. Tier one first. Explicit instruction is for everyone. We can't teach to the 70 or the 80% that just are going to learn no matter what curriculum we use, whether it's implied or not. It has to be explicit for all of them. And the earlier we can intervene, the better. Pre-K, kindergarten, first grade. Once we get to second grade, the amount we put in has declining returns. It's economies of scale. We get less out the more we put in beyond second grade. So we need to do as much as we can before that. And finally, have a policy meeting, have a meeting of the minds where we say, what are we doing to meet the neurodiversity of our classrooms? Because I've been doing this for 20 years, Liz, and maybe you've seen it too. It's no longer, maybe I'll have someone with ADHD, maybe I'll have somebody with autism, maybe I'll have someone with dyslexia. It's how many am I going to have in my classroom, right?
Absolutely. I mean, here in California, I could say 20 years ago, that was also the same. But it's
Yeah.
we're changing even more the diversity in our classroom. So
Mhm.
meeting the needs of our students that don't speak English, who are neurodiverse, can be a challenge. But we are noticing that those numbers are rising.
Well, and probably the easiest, least expensive, most cost-efficient way to do that is explicit instruction throughout all of our instruction. Another thing, there are unique needs of older learners. That's what I've seen in the comments. If you do have older learners and you're like, I don't have anything for phonemic awareness, for spelling, for reading, foundational reading practices for older learners, that's one of the areas I specialize in. I'd love to send you some information and some samples or things that you can use for your older students that are developmentally appropriate. And with that, Alicia, we can open it up for questions or comments if anybody has any, or if you have anything else you'd like to add.
Absolutely. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat now. I think we covered most of them, but in the meantime, I did want to just say thank you so much, Dr. Liz and Dr. Paul, for such a thoughtful and important conversation today. I do want to mention as a thank you for joining us today, we will be sending in our follow-up email a couple of resources. The first one is our reference guide on effective solutions for students with dyslexia, autism, and ADHD. And we'll also be sending a ready to use cheat sheet that you can reference as you evaluate and strengthen reading support for your students. Last but not least, you should see a poll popping up on your screen right now. And if you are currently looking for a solution for your school or district, you can answer yes, and someone from the Reading Horizons team will reach out to you. If you're watching the recording and not attending live, you won't see the poll question, but you can definitely reach out to us at the email address listed here, info@readinghorizons.com, and someone from our team will reach out to you. And then on the left-hand side here, you'll see this big QR code. This is if you'd like to learn more about the Reading Horizons method as a whole. So you can scan that QR code or you can visit the URL underneath it. And I'm just going to scan here if we got any questions. Are you seeing any, Paul, in the chat? I see one from Melissa. Do we have any recommendations on good resources or decodables for older students?
This has been, um, I had boy, it's been such a frustrating thing for older students because we underestimate the emotional impact of infantilizing a, an older student, making them feel like an infant, making them feel, I mean, it's dehumanizing. And it's reinforcing a narrative that isn't always explicit. It's implied that they're not smart. It has nothing to do with their intelligence. And when you experience that, we have 13 years minimum usually of school. And when you experience that for 13 years, you end up thinking that you're not intelligent. You end up thinking that you don't have choices. You end up thinking that the only option for me is to still and be violent and to act out and to, whatever it is to get my needs met. And so it begins with instructional materials that are developmentally appropriate. And I do actually Reading Horizons. I use that in my school. I cover the 18 to 21 year olds in our alternative high school and our post high school. And it's awesome because I can teach foundational reading skills with developmentally appropriate things that are made for adults. I know Anita Archer is starting to come out with some resources that are great as well. Outside of those two, there's just not a lot out there, but it is so needed. We can't neglect, and it's never too late to learn how to read, especially if you have developmentally appropriate materials. And Liz, what have you used in the past, and what recommendations would you have for older students?
That's something that we beg for all the time. Core put out some decodable books for older readers. And then I was reading in the chat from Erin. Erin had suggested Saddleback Publishing that has high interest, low level books. And I know the Reading League has put out a list that has some more. And I'm going to have to send that your way because I cannot remember the name of the publishing group. But Core is one that you can look at. We use Core as tier 2 for like phonics instruction, but we use that for middle school and beyond. There's gaps in it. I would suggest looking at Reading Horizons, but their decodables might be of some use.
Oh, Tumbleweed Publishing is a new player on the scene for older elementary students that align with any Orton Gillingham based curriculum. But it goes up to sixth, seventh grade, I believe. And then past that, the ones that you mentioned, Reading Horizons, Core, Saddlebrook, those would be good options.
Rewards also, yes.
Amazing. Okay, I don't think I see any other questions in the chat here, and we are at time. I just want to say thank you again to our presenters and thank you all for joining us today. And we hope you have an amazing rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.